Have you ever felt so broken that the weight of silence became heavier than any word could ever be? What if the scars of war didn't just mark the body, but carved out a hollow space where your voice used to live? And what if, in the midst of all that darkness, a single unexpected gesture could crack open the walls you've built around your heart? This is the story of a man who hadn't spoken a word since the grit and gunfire of Afghanistan, until a stranger's embrace on a crowded subway changed everything. In the heart of Chicago, under the grey haze of a late November sky, James "Jimmy" Carter sits on a weathered bench in Millennium Park. The wind off Lake Michigan bites at his face, sharp and relentless, carrying the faint tang of diesel and hot dog vendors from nearby streets. His hands, calloused and scarred, rest on his lap, gripping a crumpled pack of Marlboros he hasn't touched in hours. He's 42, but his eyes, dull, sunken and distant, carry the weight of a much older man. A faded army cap sits low on his head, half shielding his face from the world, but it can't hide the jagged scar that runs from his left temple to his jawline. It's a mark from a roadside bomb in Kandahar, one of many souvenirs from a war that took more than just skin. Around him, families snap photos by the gleaming Cloudgate sculpture. Tourists laugh over steaming cups of coffee, and joggers pound the pavement in neon sneakers. But Jimmy is a ghost among them, invisible, locked in a silence so deep it's as if the city's hum can't reach him. He hasn't uttered a word in 6 years, not since the day he watched his best friend bleed out in his arms under a merciless Afghan sun. Every day, Jimmy's world is the same muted loop. He wakes in a cramped studio apartment in a rundown building on the south side, the walls stained yellow from years of cigarette smoke, though he quit lighting up long ago. The room is sparse. A mattress on the floor, a folding chair and a single shelf holding a folded American flag and a framed photo of his old unit. Faces smiling in a time before everything went to hell. He dresses in the same faded flannel shirt and jeans, ignoring the mirror because he can't stand to see the stranger staring back. His mornings are spent at a local diner, where he nurses a black coffee for hours, staring out the window at the L trains rattling by. The waitresses, kind-hearted women with names like Betty and Marla, know his order by heart and don't push for small talk. They've seen the far-off look in his eyes, the way his hands tremble when a car backfires on the street. They whisper to each other that he's a vet, probably seen too much, and they leave him be. By afternoon, he's at the park, sitting on that same bench, watching the world spin on without him. It's not a life. It's a slow fade, a man unraveling thread by thread, haunted by memories that play on repeat behind his closed lids. Night after night, he sees the dust-choked roads of Afghanistan, hears the screams, smells the copper of blood. And always, the last words he spoke, yelling for a medic who never came, echo in his mind, a broken record of guilt. Jimmy's silence isn't just a choice, it's a prison. He tried once to speak after coming home. He sat in a VA therapist's office, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and cheap air freshener, while a young doctor with a clipboard asked him to open up. But the words stuck in his throat like barbed wire, and all he could do was shake his head and walk out. Since then, he's kept his pain locked tight, a vault no one can crack. He carries a small notebook in his jacket pocket, scribbling down necessities when he needs to communicate. Grocery lists, bus fares, a curt thanks scrawled for a cashier. But even that feels like too much, like giving a piece of himself away when there's so little left. The people around him have stopped trying to reach him. Neighbors in his building nod awkwardly in the hallway, mumbling a quick, "Hey man," before hurrying past. The world has moved on, but Jimmy is stuck, tethered to a past that claws at him with every breath. There are nights when he sits on the edge of his mattress, staring at an old service pistol in a locked box under the bed, wondering if silence is all he'll ever know. It's a Thursday evening, and the city is draped in the golden hues of a fading sunset. the skyline casting long shadows over the bustling streets. Jimmy boards the Blue Line at Washington Station, heading back to his place after another empty day at the park. The subway car is packed with the usual mix of Chicagoans, office workers in suits loosening their ties, students with earbuds blasting trap music, and mothers juggling shopping bags while keeping an eye on restless kids. The air smells of sweat, cheap perfume, and the metallic tang of the tracks. Jimmy stands near the door, one hand gripping the overhead bar, his gaze fixed on the scuffed floor. His army cap is pulled low, a shield against curious eyes, though no one here seems to notice him anyway. The train lurches forward, the screech of metal on metal cutting through the murmur of conversation, and he sways slightly, lost in the fog of his own thoughts. He doesn't see the man sitting a few feet away, a wiry guy in a worn leather jacket, maybe in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair, and a face etched with hard lines. The stranger's eyes, though, are sharp, searching, lingering on Jimmy in a way that feels different, like he sees past the cap, past the scar, past the silence. As the train rumbles through the underground tunnels, the crowd shifts with each stop, bodies pressing closer, then thinning out. Jimmy's mind is elsewhere, replaying the crack of gunfire, the shouted orders, the weight of a brother in arms going limp in his grip. He doesn't notice the stranger stand up, doesn't register the deliberate steps toward him, until the man is right there, close enough that Jimmy can smell the faint tobacco on his breath. Before he can react, before he can retreat into the fortress of his silence, the stranger does something unthinkable. He reaches out arms wide and pulls Jimmy into a tight, unyielding hug. It's not a casual pat on the back, not a half-hearted gesture. It's fierce, raw, like the man is holding on for dear life. Jimmy freezes, his body rigid, every muscle screaming to pull away. His breath catches, sharp and ragged, as the world narrows to the unfamiliar heat of another person's touch. The train sways, the hum of voices fades, and for a moment it's just the two of them locked in this strange, silent collision. Then the stranger whispers something, voice low and rough, barely audible over the clatter of the tracks. "I was there too, brother. Helmand, '09. I know." Those words hit Jimmy like a punch, ripping through the numbness that's cloaked him for years. His chest tightens, a storm of something he can't name. Pain, anger, relief, clawing its way up from somewhere deep. The scar on his face burns, as if it's fresh, a reminder of everything he's buried. Who is this man? How could he know the hell Jimmy's carried in silence all this time? And why, after years of being invisible, does this stranger's embrace feel like the first crack in a dam he's fought so hard to keep standing? Jimmy's breath hitches in his chest, the stranger's arms still locked around him, the weight of that whispered confession. "I was there too, brother. Helmand, '09. I know." Sinking into him like a blade. His hands, dangling awkwardly at his sides, tremble, caught between the instinct to shove this man away and the overwhelming need to collapse into the embrace. It's been years since anyone touched him like this, with intention, with understanding. His scar throbs, a phantom pain that mirrors the ache in his chest, as if the jagged line on his face is splitting open all over again, raw and exposed. The subway car hums around them, a distant rumble, but inside Jimmy a storm rages, 6 years of silence screaming to break free. He wants to yell, to demand how this stranger could possibly know the hell he's lived through, but his throat is a vice, clamping down on any sound. Instead, his eyes burn, hot with unshed tears, and he hates himself for it. He spent so long building walls, brick by brick, to keep the pain in and the world out, and now this man, this nobody, has smashed through in seconds with a hug and a handful of words. The stranger pulls back just enough to look at him, his weathered face close, eyes sharp with something that looks like recognition. Jimmy's first instinct is to turn away, to hide under the brim of his army cap, but he can't move. There's a weight in that gaze, a shared burden, and it pins him in place. "I see it in you," the man says, his voice low, rough like gravel. "You don't gotta say a damn thing. I've been where you are, locked up in your own head, replaying it over and over till it eats you alive." Jimmy's jaw tightens, a muscle twitching under the scar, and he feels naked, stripped of the armor his silence has been. How can this man see so much? How can he know the nights Jimmy spent staring at the ceiling, haunted by the ghost of his best friend, by the blood on his hands that no amount of scrubbing can wash off? Guilt claws at him, sharper now, because this stranger's words drag up the truth he's buried. He didn't just lose his voice in Afghanistan, he lost the right to speak, the right to live, when he couldn't save the one person who mattered most. The train lurches to a stop at Clark Lake, and the crowd surges, bodies brushing past them. But the stranger doesn't move, doesn't let go of the space between them. Jimmy's chest heaves, his mind a battlefield of anger and confusion. Why now? Why here, in the middle of a grimy subway car, does someone finally see him? He wants to scream that it's too late, that he's too far gone, but the words won't come. Instead, he feels a cold sweat bead on his neck, the familiar panic creeping in, the kind that hits when the memories are too loud, when the past feels closer than the present. He sees it again, unbid. The dust of Kandahar, the heat shimmering off broken asphalt, the way his friend's eyes went dull, pleading for help that never came. Jimmy's hands ball into fists, nails digging into his palms, trying to anchor himself, but the pain only sharpens the memory. He's drowning in it, and this stranger's presence, this unwanted compassion, is salt in the wound. "Look, I ain't here to push," the man says, stepping back now, giving Jimmy air but not relief. "Name's Ray. I ride this line most days. Seen you before, sitting in your own world. Didn't know till now it was the same one I've been trying to escape." His voice cracks on the last word, and Jimmy catches it, a flicker of vulnerability that mirrors his own. Ray reaches into his jacket, pulls out a crumpled pack of chewing gum, and offers a piece like it's a peace treaty. Jimmy stares at it, then at Ray, his hand still clenched. He doesn't take it. He can't. Accepting anything, even something as small as gum, feels like cracking open a door he's slammed shut for good. But Ray doesn't push, just slips the pack back into his pocket with a small nod, like he gets it. "You don't trust easy. I didn't neither, not after. Took me years to even look my wife in the eye without feeling like I didn't deserve to be there." Those words hit harder than the hug. Jimmy's mind flashes to his own family, or what's left of it. A sister in Ohio he hasn't called in years. A mother who still sends birthday cards he never opens. He doesn't deserve to be in their lives, not after what he's seen, what he's failed to do. The guilt is a lead weight, heavier now under Ray's knowing stare. The train moves again, the screech of metal filling the silence between them, and Jimmy feels the walls of the car closing in, a symbolic cage for the one inside him. He needs to get away, to retreat back to his silence, but Ray's presence is a tether, pulling him towards something he's not ready to face. Every word, every look is a challenge to the life he's built, or the lack of it. He's been a ghost for so long, invisible by choice, and now this man is forcing him to be seen. It's terrifying, and worse, it's necessary, and that contradiction tears at him, splitting him between the safety of nothingness and the pain of being known. Ray shifts, his shoulder brushing against the pole as he steadies himself. "I lost 3 guys over there. One was my brother, blood and all. Watched him step on an IED, didn't have time to yell before it was over. I blamed myself for a long time, still do some nights. But you gotta find a way to let it out, man, or it festers. Turns you into something you ain't." His eyes search Jimmy's, looking for a crack, a sign. Jimmy's throat burns, the barbed wire of his silence tightening. He wants to tell Ray he's wrong, that letting it out won't fix anything, that the festering is all he has left. But he can't. Instead, his mind clings to Ray's story, to the image of a brother gone in a flash, and it drags up his own loss. His best friend, Tommy, laughing over cheap beer in the barracks one minute, bleeding out the next. His last breath a rasp of Jimmy's name. The memory is a gut punch, and Jimmy's knees feel weak, his grip on the overhead bar tightening until his knuckles are white. He's never told anyone about Tommy, not even the VA shrink. It's his private hell, and Ray's words are trespassing on sacred, scarred ground. The train slows for the next stop, and Ray pulls a folded photograph from his wallet, worn at the edges, and holds it out. This is him, Danny. Thought I'd forget his face if I didn't carry this. You got anyone like that? Jimmy stares at the photo, a young man in fatigues, grinning under a desert sun, and something in him fractures. He doesn't answer, doesn't need to. His eyes give him away, darting away from Ray's gaze, and Ray folds the photo back with a sigh. Yeah, you do. Figured as much. Keep 'em close, even if it hurts. It's the only way they stay with you. Jimmy's chest aches, a hollow throb, because he does keep Tommy close, too close. The framed photo in his apartment, the one of his unit, is all he has left of a time when he could still smile, still speak. But looking at it is agony, a reminder of everyone he couldn't save, starting with himself. They ride in silence for a few stops, the air between them heavy with unspoken stories. Jimmy's mind churns, battling the pull of Ray's words, the weight of that hug still lingering like a brand on his skin. He spent years avoiding connection, dodging anyone who might see past the silence. But Ray is different. He's not asking for Jimmy to talk, not demanding answers. He's just there, a mirror to a pain Jimmy thought was his alone. It's unsettling, and it stirs something dangerous in him, hope. Not the bright, shiny kind, but the bruised, battered sort that hurts to touch. What if Ray's right? What if letting it out could loosen the noose around his heart? But the fear is stronger, rooted deep. The fear that speaking, that feeling, will unleash a flood he can't control, one that will sweep away the little piece of himself he's clung to. The train pulls into Jackson and Ray straightens, his hand brushing Jimmy's shoulder briefly, a gesture of solidarity. I get off at Roosevelt next stop. Don't gotta say nothing, but I'm here tomorrow, same time. And hey, if you're watching this and you've got your own story, hit that subscribe button down below. Takes 2 seconds, and it means we can keep sharing stories like this, ones that matter. His voice softens again. Back to Jimmy. Think about it, all right? You ain't as alone as you feel. Jimmy doesn't respond, doesn't even nod, but Ray's words linger as the man moves toward the door, blending into the crowd. Alone. That word has defined Jimmy for so long, a mantra of his isolation. But now it's cracking under the weight of Ray's persistence. He watches Ray disappear as the doors close, and the emptiness of the car feels heavier, a void that echoes with the stranger's presence. That night, back in his cramped South Side apartment, Jimmy can't sleep. The mattress creaks under him, the yellowed walls closing in as he stares at the ceiling, Ray's voice looping in his head. You ain't as alone as you feel. He rolls over, his hand brushing against the locked box under the bed, the one holding his old service pistol. He doesn't open it, not tonight, but its presence is a dark comfort, a reminder of the edge he walks. Instead, he pulls out the small notebook from his jacket, the one he uses for scribbled necessities, and flips it open with shaking hands. He hasn't written anything personal in years, but now, in the dim light of a flickering bulb, he scrawls a single word, Tommy. Seeing it on paper rips something open, a wound he's bandaged with silence. He writes more, haltingly, fragments of memory, dust, blood, sorry, until the page is a mess of ink and pain. He stops, breathing hard, the pen trembling in his grip. This is the closest he's come to speaking in 6 years, and it terrifies him. What if this is the floodgate? What if there's no going back? The next morning, Jimmy's routine is shattered. He sits at the diner, his black coffee untouched, staring out at the L trains rattling past, but his mind isn't on the street. It's on Ray, on that hug, on the photo of Danny that looked so much like his own ghost's. Betty, the waitress with grey streaks in her hair, notices his distraction and lingers by his table, wiping her hands on her apron. "You all right, hon? Look like you seen a ghost." Her voice is gentle, no judgment, but Jimmy flinches. He grabs his notebook, scribbles a quick "fine," and slides it toward her, avoiding her eyes. She frowns, unconvinced, but pats his shoulder before walking off. Her touch, even brief, feels electric after yesterday, a reminder of how starved he is for connection, even as he rejects it. He leaves the diner early, unable to sit still, and finds himself not at Millennium Park, but walking toward the National Veterans Memorial at Soldier Field, a place he's avoided since coming home. The lakefront wind is brutal, slicing through his flannel, but he stands before the curved wall of names, the Chicago skyline looming in the background, a symbol of a city that's moved on while he's stuck in the past. He traces a finger over the cold stone, not looking for Tommy's name. Tommy's not here, not officially, but feeling the weight of every loss etched into it. It's a pilgrimage he didn't plan, a confrontation with a grief he's run from, and it shakes him to the core. Hours later, he's back on the blue line, same time as yesterday, his heart a drumbeat in his chest. He doesn't know if Ray will be there, doesn't know if he wants him to be, but he's drawn to the possibility, a moth to a flame he's not sure he can survive. The car is crowded again, the air thick with the same mix of sweat and steel, and Jimmy stands near the door, cap low, eyes scanning despite himself. Then he sees him, Ray, in the same leather jacket sitting near the middle, his sharp gaze already on Jimmy. No surprise in his expression, just a quiet nod, like he knew Jimmy would come. The older man stands, weaves through the crowd and stops a foot away, giving Jimmy space but not distance. "Didn't think you'd show," Ray says, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "Glad I was wrong." Jimmy's throat tightens, his notebook burning a hole in his pocket, but he doesn't reach for it. Words unspoken crowd his mind, questions, confessions, a lifetime of pain, but they stay trapped. Ray doesn't push, just stands there, a steady presence, until he says, "I got a group, vets, like us. Meet every week at a church basement on the west side. Ain't much, just coffee and talking, but it helps. You don't gotta say a word, just listen. Come with me tonight." The invitation is a grenade, lobbed into the fragile ruins of Jimmy's world. A group, other vets, other stories, other pain. The thought is suffocating. A room full of mirrors, reflecting everything he's hidden from. His hands shake, the familiar panic rising, but beneath it, there's something else. A flicker of need, a desperate want to not be alone, even if it hurts. Ray watches him, patient, as the train hums through the underground, each stop a tick of a clock counting down to a decision. Jimmy thinks of the notebook, of Tommy's name scrawled in the dark, of the pistol under his bed, of 6 years of silence that have cost him everything. He thinks of Ray's hug, the first human touch in years that didn't feel like a lie. And in that moment, torn between running and reaching out, Jimmy makes a choice. He looks at Ray, his eyes raw, unguarded for the first time, and gives the smallest nod, just enough to say yes, just enough to step off the edge into the unknown. It's not a word, not yet, but it's a crack in the dam, a fracture in the silence, and as the train pulls into Roosevelt, Jimmy steps out with Ray, toward a night that might break him, or begin to rebuild him. As Jimmy steps off the train with Ray at Roosevelt, the cold Chicago air hits him like a slap, sharp and unyielding, cutting through the thin layers of his flannel. His boots scuff against the platform, each step heavy with the weight of a choice he's not sure he can carry. His heart thunders in his chest, a frantic rhythm that drowns out the distant screech of the departing train. Ray walks a step ahead, his leather jacket hunched against the wind, his silence giving Jimmy just enough room to wrestle with the storm inside him. The city pulses around them, car horns blaring, voices shouting over the roar of traffic. But to Jimmy, It's all muted, a background hum to the chaos in his mind. He's agreed to go to this meeting, this group of vets in a church basement, but every fiber of his being screams to turn back, to retreat to the safety of his silence, to the dim yellow walls of his apartment where no one can reach him. His hands twitch at his sides, the notebook in his jacket pocket a lifeline he's tempted to grab, to scrawl some excuse and bolt. But Ray's presence, steady and unassuming, keeps him tethered to this path, even as fear gnaws at his edges. They walk several blocks, the neon signs of late-night diners and corner stores casting flickers of light across their faces. Jimmy's breath comes in shallow bursts, his scar itching under the brim of his army cap as if it senses the exposure he's walking into. A church looms ahead, a modest brick building with a crooked steeple, its windows glowing faintly against the darkening sky. Ray slows as they approach the side entrance, a rusted metal door propped open with a brick, and turns to Jimmy. "Ain't no pressure, man. You don't like it, we leave. Simple as that, but I'm telling you, first time I came here, I thought I'd choke on my own spit just sitting in the room. Didn't, and I'm still standing." His voice is gruff, but there's a crack in it, a raw edge that tells Jimmy this isn't just empty encouragement. Ray's been where he is, teetering on the brink of collapse, and somehow he's pulled himself back. Jimmy doesn't respond, can't, but his jaw clenches, and he gives the barest of nods before following Ray down a narrow staircase into the basement. The air below is thick with the scent of old coffee and musty hymnals, a faint dampness clinging to the low ceiling. Folding chairs are arranged in a loose circle, maybe a dozen people already seated, their faces a mix of weariness and guarded hope. Most are men, some older than Ray, others closer to Jimmy's age, their postures telling stories of burdens carried too long. A few women sit among them, one with a prosthetic leg visible beneath rolled-up jeans, her gaze distant but sharp. A table in the corner holds a coffee urn and a tray of stale donuts, the kind of spread that speaks of scraped-together resources and quiet determination. Jimmy freezes at the threshold, his boots rooted to the cracked linoleum floor, every instinct roaring to flee. These people, these strangers, they'll see him, they'll know. His silence won't shield him here, not in a room built for breaking down walls. Ray's hand brushes his shoulder, light but firm, a silent nudge forward, and Jimmy forces himself to move, to take a seat at the edge of the circle, his cap pulled low, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. The meeting starts with a man named Carl, a burly guy with a grey beard and a voice like gravel standing at the center. He doesn't waste time on formalities, just says, "We're here to share what we can, when we can. No judgment, no fixes, just ears." His eyes sweep the room, landing briefly on Jimmy, and there's no pity there, only a tired understanding that cuts deeper than any words. One by one, people speak. A younger guy with tattoos snaking up his arms talks about nightmares that wake his kids, his voice breaking as he admits he can't look at fireworks without flinching. A woman with a soft southern drawl shares how she lost her squad in Iraq, how she still hears their laughter in quiet moments, her hands trembling as she clutches a paper cup. Each story is a shard of glass, cutting into Jimmy, reflecting pieces of his own pain he's tried to bury. His chest tightens with every word, his breath ragged, the walls of the basement closing in. He wants to scream, to tell them to stop, that he can't handle their truths on top of his own. But his throat is a locked vault, the key rusted shut. His fingers dig into his palms, the pain grounding him just enough to keep him from bolting. Ray sits beside him, not speaking, just there, a quiet anchor in the storm. When the circle comes to him, Ray leans forward, elbows on his knees, and his voice drops low, carrying the weight of years. "Lost my brother Danny in Helmand. Stepped on an IED, gone before I could blink. I carried that guilt like a second skin, blamed myself for not seeing it, for not saving him. Still do some days. But being here hearing y'all, it's reminded me I ain't the only one fighting that war in my head. And last night, I met someone who's fighting it too. He glances at Jimmy, not with expectation, but with a quiet nod of solidarity. Don't gotta talk tonight, brother. Just know we see ya. The words hit Jimmy like a wave, crashing over the dam he's built around himself. His eyes burn, hot and stinging, and he ducks his head, hiding under the brim of his cap. But there's no escaping the weight of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. The room blurs, the voices fading into a hum as his mind reels, grappling with the reality that these people, these broken strangers, might understand the hell he's lived through in a way no one else ever could. The meeting stretches on, each story piling onto the last, until Carl calls for a break. People shuffle to the coffee table, their murmurs low, a fragile camaraderie in the shared act of pouring bitter brew into styrofoam cups. Jimmy doesn't move, rooted to his chair, his hands still buried in his pockets, gripping the edges of his notebook like it's a shield. Ray stays beside him, not pushing, just sipping his coffee with a quiet patience that grates on Jimmy's nerves and soothes them at the same time. The tension coils tighter inside him, a spring wound to its breaking point, every word he's heard tonight echoing in the hollow of his chest. He thinks of Tommy, of the last time he saw him alive, laughing over a stupid joke in the barracks. Then the blood, the dust, the silence after. He thinks of his own voice, lost somewhere in that Afghan sun, and the guilt that's kept it buried ever since. And now, here, in this damp basement with its flickering fluorescent lights, he feels the edges of that silence fraying, threatening to unravel him completely. When the break ends, Carl asks if anyone else has something to share before they close. The room quiets, an expectant hush settling over the circle, and Jimmy feels it like a spotlight, even though no one's staring. His heart slams against his ribs, a wild, desperate beat, and his throat burns with the pressure of words he hasn't spoken in 6 years. He wants to stay silent, to let the moment pass, to keep his pain locked tight where it can't hurt anyone else. But Ray's words from the train loop in his mind, "You gotta find a way to let it out, man, or it festers." And they clash with the raw stories he's heard tonight, each one a crack in his armor. His hands shake as he pulls the notebook from his pocket, the worn pages trembling in his grip. He flips to the scrawl from last night, the mess of ink spelling out Tommy's name, the fragments of memory, dust, blood, sorry, and the weight of it nearly buckles him. He can't speak, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, he can let someone see. He doesn't stand, doesn't make a show of it, just slides the notebook across the small space to Ray, his hand lingering on the edge for a second too long before pulling back. Ray takes it, his brow furrowing as he reads, and Jimmy watches him, every muscle taut, waiting for judgment, for rejection, for the flood of shame that's kept him silent all this time. But Ray's face softens, his eyes tracing the words with a reverence that catches Jimmy off guard. He looks up, meeting Jimmy's gaze, and there's no pity there, only a deep, bone-weary understanding. "Tommy," Ray says quietly, not for the room, just for Jimmy. "He was your brother, huh? Not by blood, but by bond. I get it." He slides the notebook back, his hand brushing Jimmy's briefly, and adds, "Thanks for showing me. Means more than you know." The words are simple, but they cut through Jimmy like a blade, slicing open something raw and aching. His chest heaves, a silent sob caught in his throat, and for the first time in years, he feels the weight of his grief shared, even if just for a moment. It's not forgiveness, not yet, but it's a crack in the dam, a trickle of release that burns as much as it heals. The meeting ends soon after, the group murmuring goodbyes, some exchanging nods or quiet words as they fold chairs and drain the last of the coffee. Jimmy stays seated, the notebook back in his pocket, his hands steadier now, but still trembling at the edges. Ray lingers, not rushing him, just waiting as the room empties. "You did good tonight," Ray says finally, his voice low. "Didn't have to say a word, but you showed up. That's the hardest damn part." Jimmy doesn't respond, can't, but the tension in his shoulders eases just a fraction, a small surrender to the idea that maybe, just maybe, he's not as alone as he's felt. Ray claps him on the back, a gentle tap, and gestures toward the stairs. "Come on, I'll walk you to the station. Same time next week if you're up for it." Jimmy nods, a little more firmly this time, and follows him out into the biting night air, the weight of the evening settling into his bones, heavy but not suffocating, a burden he's beginning to think he might not have to carry solo. In the weeks that follow, Jimmy's world shifts, slow and jagged, like a fractured bone knitting itself back together. He starts showing up to the meetings, not every week at first, but often enough that Carl and the others begin to recognize him, to offer small nods of acknowledgement that don't demand anything in return. He doesn't speak, not yet, but he listens, and each story chips away at the walls he's built, each shared pain a mirror to his own. He starts leaving the apartment more, not just for the diner or the park, but to walk the lakefront, to sit near the Veterans Memorial at Soldier Field, tracing the names on the wall with a quiet reverence he couldn't muster before. His notebook fills with more scrawls, not just Tommy's name now, but fragments of thoughts, of guilt, of moments from Afghanistan that he's starting to face instead of flee. The service pistol under his bed stays locked in its box, untouched, a shadow he's not ready to confront, but no longer reaching for in the dark. One evening, after a meeting where a young vet shared a story of losing a friend in a way that echoed Tommy's death too closely, Jimmy makes a choice. He waits until the room clears, until it's just him and Ray stacking chairs, and he pulls a worn photograph from his wallet. The one of his old unit, the edges frayed from years of being carried. Tommy's face grins out from the center, frozen in a time before everything broke. Jimmy's hand shakes as he holds it out to Ray, a sacrifice of memory, a renunciation of the silence he's used to shield that pain. "This is him," he rasps, his voice a broken whisper, the first words he's spoken in 6 years, rough and raw, as if dragged up from gravel. Ray takes the photo, his eyes softening, and nods. He's got a good smile. "You keep him close, yeah?" Jimmy swallows hard, the burn in his throat fierce, but he nods back a silent vow. Letting go of the photo for even a moment feels like peeling off a layer of skin, but it's also a release, a symbolic shedding of the guilt he's worn as armor. He takes the photo back, tucks it away, but the act of showing it, of speaking, leaves him lighter, a step toward a healing he's not sure he deserves, but is beginning to want. Months later, on a grey spring morning, Jimmy stands at the edge of Millennium Park, near the bench that used to be his daily haunt, his prison of solitude. The wind off Lake Michigan carries the first hints of warmth, a promise of something softer after the brutal winter. In his hand, he holds the folded American flag from his shelf, the one that sat gathering dust since he came home, a relic of a life he thought he'd lost. He walks slowly toward the lake, the city skyline a jagged silhouette behind him, and stops at the water's edge. With trembling hands, he unfolds the flag just enough to press it against his chest, a quiet salute to Tommy, to the men he couldn't save, to the piece of himself he left in Afghanistan. Then he refolds it, tighter this time, and slips it into his jacket, closer to his heart than it's ever been. It's not a grand gesture, not a burial, but a carrying forward, a way to honor without drowning. He turns back toward the city, his scar catching the pale sunlight, no longer a mark of shame, but a map of survival. Time, he thinks, doesn't erase the wounds of war, but maybe it can dull their sharpness, carve space for something like peace. And in that space, in the quiet between battles fought within, there's a chance to start again, to speak again, to live again, even if the words come slow, even if the healing stings. as he walks away toward a diner where Betty will smile at his familiar face, toward a meeting later where Ray will clap him on the shoulder, Jimmy feels the weight of silence lifting, not gone, but lighter, shared. And if this story has stirred something in you, if you've felt the ache of a past too heavy to carry alone, leave a comment below with, "I believe in healing." Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Hit that subscribe button if you want to keep hearing stories like this, stories of breaking, but also of becoming. It takes a second, but it means we can keep shining a light on the paths we walk together.